Hello and welcome to Just Keep Writing,
a podcast for writers.
By writers.
To keep you writing.
I'm Shingai.
I'm Erin Brown.
I'm Yvette.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Bri.
And this is another episode of Just Keep Writing. I'm so excited to be on here with all new faces, all new names. And I would just love to start by asking you all to share a little bit about yourselves so that our listeners can have a chance to get to know you as we begin to talk about the essay that we will be diving in today, which is The Laugh of Medusa by Hélène. I have a really hard time saying her last name. Does anyone know how to pronounce her last name? Cixous.
I think it's Cixous.
Cixous. Thank you, Bri. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amazing. So why don't we start with your first impressions of the essay and also a little bit about who you are and your writing and anything that you would like our listeners to know. Erin, would you start us off?
Well, let's see. I'll introduce myself. My name is Erin Brown. I am a speculative fiction writer with emphasis on marginalized viewpoints and voices. Mostly horror, but, a little bit of fabulism and that sort of thing. And the idea of creation, comes up a lot in speculative fiction, as a magical form. And so coming across this essay, it seemed very pertinent to helping to find the language to explain the why, my why, when it comes to writing. I think I came away, my first impression or the emotion that I came away with was that at first I thought it was anger, but it wasn't. It was more like I was energized. It felt like hearing a battle cry. And I was ready to write. I was ready to paint. I was ready to box. I felt I had been called into action and I had duties, so that's really how I felt after reading it.
That's amazing. What about you, Sarah?
Hi, I am Sarah A. Macklin. I am primarily a fantasy author based in the U.S. Southeast. I particularly have a love of world building. That's kind of what brought me to fantasy. And my particular impressions of this essay, it was very interesting to see a different perspective on femininity and the creative process. Because primarily of the time I grew up in is kind of right after this wave of the feminist movement. So when I was a little girl, there was a whole lot of messaging of girls going out and you can be anything you want to be, and we were being astronauts, and we were going in. There were so many firsts when I was a kid. So it's like to see writing from the time when the breakout was happening was pretty interesting to see.
I definitely want to get into that a little bit more and just like the context around your life and how you were thinking about feminism growing up with that perspective. Bri, what about you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Bri Stokes. I'm based out of South Los Angeles in California. I am a writer, a poet, a producer, a curator. And I first encountered this essay maybe about 1.5 to 2 years ago. And similarly to what Erin said, I think that my initial takeaway was I felt energized by it. And I think that my viewing of it was as something that is meant to be theoretical and a starting point. And I think that Cixous' ideas are meant to be built upon and kind of blown open and re-examined and re-explored. So I think what drew me to this essay initially was the possibility of potentially building a framework off of the ideas that she began with. So I was intrigued by the thought of, a lot of what she's describing, again, it exists in the realm of the theoretical, or it exists in the realm of myth, right? Like, how can we potentially crystallize that as a form of writing that exists within the body? So I think I was just interested about like her thinking about the body and how that can apply to the creative process.
Thank you for sharing, Bri. It helps a lot to hear, especially considering that you're the one who suggested the essay. And I feel like hearing how it impacted your writing, which is something that I mentioned earlier, made me excited about incorporating it into my own writing practice. Yvette, what did you think? What are your impressions? And also, welcome back. You were here on our last episode.
Hi, I'm Yvette. I'm a speculative fiction author from Zimbabwe, as well as a professor of creative writing. I think this is like pretty radical for its time, especially what it says about like embracing your body, embracing pleasure. And I think like as a woman growing up, there's just a lot of shame when it comes to your body, whether it's like periods, whether it's, your weight, whatever it is, there's always this shame around your body and pleasure, even, talking about like masturbation. So I found it radical in that way, and that I really do want to explore that pleasure from writing and that relationship with the body. And I'm excited to hear what everybody thought about that, and what does it look like for us to like write away from our shame.
Thanks for sharing, Yvette. I'm also going to share a little bit about how this essay impacted me. When I was reading it, I was really invigorated by so much of it. And I was also curious about the context in which it was written in. And so I did a little bit of research, which I wanted to share with our listeners, just in case you haven't heard of this essay before. You can find all of this on a Wikipedia page. It's not that deep, but a little context never hurts anyone. So The Laugh of the Medusa is a 1975 essay by the French feminist critique Hélène Cixous, originally written in French as, I'm going to mess this up, La Rêverie de la Medusa. In 1975, a revised version was translated into English by Paula Cohen and Keith Cohen in 1976. Cixous was born in Oran, French Algeria, also known as colonial Algeria, to Jewish parents. And her mother became a midwife in Algiers following her father's death until her expulsion with the last French doctors and midwives in 1971. Her mother and brother returned to Algeria following the country's independence in 1962, and they were arrested, and Cixous obtained their release with the help of Ahmed Ben Bell's lawyer. So this history and context was really interesting for me because the only person that I've read or studied around that time in relation to the Algiers is Frantz Fanon, and he was really involved in like a type of psychoanalysis critique that seems to be similar to Hélène. And he was approaching it from like a decolonial Black lens, and she was approaching it from a like feminist lens. Yeah, and that was just really interesting to think about. I'm curious how the context around the essay affects y'all's reading of the essay, like knowing who this woman was, and when she was writing in.
Now, I didn't know a whole lot about this before I got this essay, and so I'm just familiar with sort of what was going on in feminism in the 70s, and I was aware of the kind of oversight that was happening when it came to intersectionalism, being a woman, being feminist, being Black, as three separate things which combine in different ways to different effects, both internally and in presentation and in interpretation. So I think mostly it just, given the context of the time period and what I know about the time period, it just seems like a very loud and brazen declaration of meaning, and of responsibility. I was really taken back by the language of just being, this is what you need to be doing, do it like now, and encourage others to do it. And people tell you not to do it, fight them. And the energy, it just, I could see the time period in that energy. So I think that was one of my biggest takeaways.
Yeah, and you called it a battle cry before, which I love that expression.
Yeah, it gets the blood going. And it's not calling for people to step up for reward or for recognition. It's calling for women to step up to make themselves heard. The prepare for battle and engage, basically, with the overwhelming force of patriarchal society. Sitting back does not make you safe. So go carve a space in this world, in this medium, for yourself and your sisters. It is your responsibility. That was what I heard in the when I'm describing it as a battle cry. Like that's. I don't know if anybody else does. Anybody else feel battle cry-ish about it?
Bri is head nodding, like deep.
I definitely did. I think, Erin, I can't remember if it was you or someone else, felt that they identified a sense of anger in Cixous' words. And I definitely felt that as well. And I think that passion and that anger sort of carries throughout the entire piece, and it sort of weaves through the poetry of it. And what I find most interesting is that I think even as Cixous was communicating the ways in which women really need to get into like their physical being and excavate it in order to create, I think it's also clear that she was limited as she was writing it. And I just think that's so fascinating to look back 50 years later, and be able to notice that. Like I was saying earlier, I think the text is highly theoretical, but in my own personal view on it, I think what she was attempting to do was work within the realm of myth. I think she was working within the realm of myth because I think a lot of other texts about the female experience at that time had sort of relegated women and femmes and the feminine to the place of the other, the place of the unconscious, the place that can only sort of like a territory that can only be accessed through like magic and fantasy. And so it's interesting to see how she was trying to write her way out of that while also kind of being stuck in the language, I would say. And yeah, I think that, just so much of what she's working in a lot of metaphors and a lot of the realm of fantasy. And so, that was something that stood out to me as well, how you could feel the passion of her just endeavoring to kind of like break free from the society that she was shackled to, the circumstances that she was shackled to. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I really love what you said, Bri, about the limitations of the language that she had access to too, because like when I was reading this, so much of it also reminded me of Audre Lorde's work. And Audre Lorde, the uses of anger, especially as we've been talking about, like the way anger weaves through this text, but also the uses of the erotic, because there's so much eroticism too weaved into this text. And I also think back on what Erin was talking about with intersectionality and how, as the years have progressed since she wrote this text, there has been a lot more critical intersectional work done by Black feminists that which something that came up for us earlier was like some of the gender essentialism that feels very pertinent in her text. So there's been work after that has opened up and expanded our relationship to freeing ourselves from the patriarchy through writing. But I also really liked what you said about her being trapped in the shackles of society's definitions of the unconscious, and the realm of the metaphor and the imagination. And it brings me to something, Erin, you had said earlier as we were preparing to do this podcast on laughter as sacred expression of joy or profane derision, and snakes as sacred protection or sacred punishment. And those thoughts just had me thinking about, like, you know, who defines what is madness versus what is sacred? Yeah. And how is that, like, how are those things inside of our bodies as femme bodies, as women bodies, as like socialized feminine in the world? Yeah. How is that autonomy taken from us with those definitions?
I wonder if it is. I think one of the reasons why her mentions of the use and the surrender to something like laughter is because of the power that laughter carries. And I don't just mean so much, it's joy and it's music and it's spontaneous, natural, connection, and it's communication, but it's also, a judgment when it comes to the strict patriarchal, sex, or gender roles and that sort of thing. And I think about, that quote where, men are afraid we'll laugh and women are afraid they'll kill. They're really afraid we'll laugh. That is a terror. And that's power. And so what does this mean? I mean, laughter can tear down a society, a civilization. Laughter can tear down a person. Laughter can lift up a person. Laughter can unite a nation. And the way that it's mentioned in this context, a woman's laughter is a kind of survival. It's a kind of overcoming, and it is a kind of judgment, especially within patriarchal spaces. And so some of the voice that is that the current society is trying to silence when it comes to women isn't just our words, it's our laughter too, and our expressions of joy and our expressions of judgment, because it's that powerful. So when I mentioned, laughter as sacred or profane, the underlying question is sacred and profane having to do with what is the governing force, what is the God here. If the God is feminine, then it's joy and it's life. But if the God is masculine, then a woman's laughter is destruction and evil and death to the ego, to the pride, to the power, to the feeling of superiority. So when just creating opportunities to express our voice and to laugh, despite the external definitions of what it means and the projection of judgment, is something to be looked at. And I think that they cover it a bit in the essay. Yeah. I got really deep into laughter. I'm sorry. I know this isn't an essay about laughter, but
no, that was brilliant.
So it means
I was with you. And like, it makes me think about the section of the essay where she talks about like women's embodiment, basically, when they speak, and how like that it's all of their body that is speaking, Yvette, you had something to say.
Yeah, I love that, Erin. So going back to like Shingai's initial question about like the context of the author growing up in colonial Algeria, and what I found really interesting about the text is that it's both radical for its time and also a product of its time. Like, first reading it, and women are described as, the dark continent, which is, the colonial term for Africa. I was a little taken back by that initially, but I came to understand it that she was saying that masculinity is kind of framed as this colonial entity that's pillaging the female body, and femininity is like this kind of like scary, incomprehensible thing that has to be pillaged and, colonized and brought to heel. So I understood the point there. But yeah, I was a little uncomfortable initially that I feel like the dark continent phrasing, really took me out. But I understand how she was talking about women being kind of treated as the other, or treated as kind of like the dark continent to be pillaged.
I think I projected meaning onto that because of the kind of research and writing that I do when it comes to like writing horror. You have to play around with all the multiple meanings of dark and darkness, and for so long, and even in the context of colonization of Africa, dark would sometimes mean as of yet undefined. There's no illumination to exactly what this thing does, what these people are saying, what this fruit is, what path through this place. And the darkness was more about a lack of complete ownership of understanding of a resource or a spot or a person or a people or a language, as it was skin or lesserness or race or that kind of thing too. And so, in my head, when I first read The Dark, I had to go back, which is like, okay, what color is this author? But after that, I really thought about it, and I was just like, okay, so women as a people who have not spoken out about what their reality is, the world is in the dark about it. And the fact that we are not defined, and we just have this overlying judgment of undefinable beneath the necessary defining, just it's dark over there where the ladies are. I was projecting that a little bit onto it too. So I know I do tend to give the benefit of the doubt more often than I should, but I will say, I when I think about the dark continent of Africa, and just all that has not yet been discovered that is still governing itself, that's a little bit of the definition for me. And I think that ties over to what the essay is about women. What is not known is still ours, and we do get to define it.
Bri and then Sarah?
Yeah, Erin, I really like the point that you raise. And when I encountered that line the first time I read it, it also made me a little uncomfortable. But the way that I thought about it was that she was articulating, again, if we're considering that she is writing in the language of the symbolic and the realm of myth, my perspective was that she was articulating darkness as the womb, or like the fear of the womb. You know, there's a really interesting book called The Monstrous Feminine, which is like, it's basically an analysis of different horror movies and horror movie tropes, and how there is this trope of a fear of the female body, a fear of like the interiority of it, like what exists, the fact that life comes from it, and so much happens that is not visible to the eye, or perhaps like in the context of this essay and our conversation, to the patriarchal or masculine quote unquote eye. So that's how I sort of, that's what I took it to mean personally. And I also just wanted to circle back to the conversation about laughter as well, because what you mentioned about that, Erin, it reminded me of just this idea of women and femmes and feminine identified people carrying so much history and uncharted territory and stories within our bodies. It reminds me of this incredible book. It's called God is a Black Woman. It was written by Christina Cleveland. And she talks about how the difference between a colonized understanding of spirituality or religion and how that filters into like our awareness of our own bodies is, she refers to the Christian capitalist white supremacist God as a white male God, all one word. And she says that white male God is focused on transcendence, being outside of the body, existing as far out of the physical as possible, because that's sort of, where it can start to filter down to control. And the female God, the female spirituality or understanding of God is about immanence. It's about the here and now, the physical, what's internal, what is seeking to burst forth and come through. So yeah, that just triggered that in my brain.
Oh, when I first encountered the dark continent analogy, it's like I understood that she was meaning something that was mysterious, but I immediately went to her Wikipedia page because that I need to know what context she is coming from in this. And it's like, it seems to me an extremely Eurocentric idea of this femininity, that it's this flighty thing that is struggling to come out. And I come from a culture of very loud and outspoken women, and that is where I learned femininity. Because I'm from South Carolina, and my people are actually from near the coast of South Carolina and have literally been there since we got off the boat. So we're literally as close as you can get in this country to Africa. So for me, it's like she kept using analogies of flight and flying, but for me, femininity has always felt more grounded and of the earth and stronger. And believe me, my grandmother would never let you not know what's on her mind and what she is feeling right at this moment. So I understand what she was saying, and I understand the time, because this essay is only 4 years older than me. But it's like, I would love to read more I need to read more Black authors from that time, because South Carolina's educational system sucks. So I'm playing catch up. But it's like, it was such a different mode of considering femininity that made it interesting to see what someone closer to my cultural niche would think of this and the struggles at the time.
That's such a good point, Sarah. And again, it makes me think about like Audre Lorde, because I really feel like a lot of the things that she is saying, Audre Lorde also says, and they are writing around the same time. Like The Transformation of Silence into Language is an essay by Audre Lorde that speaks to the ways that we have been taught to be afraid of our own voice, which resonated very heavily in this essay. It was like, I could see them being put in conversation too. The thing about flightiness and loving between doorways, for me, that felt more resonant with my queerness than with my womanness. And I mentioned this in the Google Doc. It reminded me of Saidiya Hartman's Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, which is a book where she documents like queer Black histories in America. And she talks about the concept of critical fabulation, of imagining into the histories of people's lives when they haven't been written down or archived. And yeah, I was also thinking about Audre Lorde's poem, A Litany for Survival, where she talks about loving in doorways, and that's what it feels when your love is illegal or like not recognized or seen. Yeah, so that was just an interesting thought. When it comes to a grounded type of femininity, you're making me think of my next question, which is how this essay speaks to the relationship between writing and embodiment. And I'm curious about what that relationship has been like for you all as Black femmes writing. And yes, I can share these titles later.
I don't want to monopolize going first all the time. So does anybody? I'm gonna.
You make everyone else brave. Thank you.
I think because we are portals, and because we are have been cast as the people who move between worlds, serve different worlds, carry worlds from place to place, that writing allows us more of an agency, I suppose, and where to go, what it means. We name these places and we give the directions, but I don't know that I feel that the writing, the expression is something that is embodied exactly, because when I think about my relationship to dealing with the outside world, I'm safer within. And I keep my truth within, and I develop it within, and then I present it in places that are safe. It might be a part of my evolution to kind of move past that type of thinking. It's part of what I suppose the battle cry is here, to shout it out. But shouting it out takes me out of my body more than bringing me in, because I am perfectly chill writing my little stories for myself and living my truth within myself. And so when I'm trying to influence the world, it's not from an internal place. It's not with an internal sensation. So I sort of have to leave the safety of my body to write. And I have to consider, the other side of communication, which is how the message is received and how to shape it. That alters how it naturally starts within me. So it's not an alteration of the body. It's something out in the ether. It's more of a spiritual thing for me, I think, than physical.
Ashe, bless. What about you, Bri?
It's interesting. I think that I tend to have the opposite experience. I have PTSD from sexual trauma. And I think that for me, my body never really feels safe. I think that to be in my body, to be present, is something that I've really struggled with throughout my life. I think that it's something that has always felt very threatening to me, or, like something that could open up the door to me getting hurt. So I think that's another one of the reasons why initially I was so drawn to the essay and the idea of getting into the body as a tool, as a practice. And I find that writing helps me do that, actually, because especially when I write poetry, I find that when I write fiction, it does feel very spiritual. Like it feels like it comes from somewhere over here and I don't know where that is. But when I write poetry, like I actually feel the words in my body. And then, I kind of tap in to listen so that I can bring what I'm hearing and feeling out and put it on the page. And, so I think that that's sort of how I view writing as a form of embodiment. Like I try to use it as a tool to just get really present, to be really honest about what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, to not try to place limitations on whatever is seeking to move through my body, whatever emotion, whatever experience or feeling. And I think that I just use it as a way to be present and to be more aware of my environment as well, to be more aware of who I could be potentially connecting with, where there could be a connection, where there could be an experience that lights me up or draws me to the next thing that helps me to write more, that produces more poetry, that, starts to allow more of that to gestate within me. Because again, it's something that I really do struggle with. So yeah.
For me, with writing, I am always in my head. Ever since I was a little girl, I'm always constantly in my head, mostly entertaining myself because the world is boring. So writing feels like more of an lancing a wound for me. I have to release it or else it will start to fester and my mind will get too full. So it's like especially when I'm at my best writing, it is like it is draining directly from my brain to the page. And after that, I feel a sense of peace about it because the idea is down and it's there and I don't have to hold on to it. And the actual release brings me so much both joy and peace, and my mind can rest instead of running over it again or expounding it or taking up much more room, because I always tell my husband I only have so many synapses. I can't hold all of this in. So it's like I don't really inhabit, it's more of releasing the creations.
I'm thinking of how traditional African storytelling has always been, in a way, embodied. So, thinking of griots, saranganos, and how the stories lived in their bodies. It wasn't written down, and the story would, change depending on the audience or, who they're speaking to. And I think I carried that with my spoken word poetry. I used to. Right now, I'm not doing it a lot, and I want to go back to my spoken word poetry practice. But when I was deep in the spoken word community, like Bree said, you feel the words in your body. You're using your whole body. You're emoting. You're using your voice. And I think in that way, I think poetry really allowed me to kind of tap into that embodied storytelling experience that of griots of old.
I really appreciate that point of it. Like I also perform spoken word poetry and I definitely feel like the relationship to being able to write from a place of all of your body movements versus being able to write just from like a space without movement, without body, without the physical aspects. And now I'm thinking about the unconscious, because that's something that's also come up through this text, and how you are able to channel the unconscious, especially if, as Erin said, you're thinking about yourself as a portal when you are writing, or body as portal, and like, what does the unconscious represent for you? For me, it brought up memories of Afro-surrealist thought, and what is happening beneath the reality that we see. What's coming up for y'all?
When I think about the unconscious, I think mostly about connection. And I think about connection to the divine, connection to the natural, connection to the now, or the past or the future, and to others. And the connection without interruption, or at least intentional interruption. So, interruption being separateness, independence, a self apart from the everything. So when I think about the unconscious in terms of the writing and the responsibility to express ourselves as women, to write ourselves into existence, as this essay calls us to do, it's more of I don't want to say necessarily obstacle, but I'll bring up the dark again. And I'll use symbolism because I'm just having trouble expressing this thought. So we're just going to make up an example here. Bear with me. If you're in a dark room and you can't find the light switch, you need to get the lay of the room. You're going to step on some stuff and you're going to bump your feet, and the darkness that you're seeing really isn't the truth. The carpet and the Legos on it and the chair in the corner is the truth. And so the relationship to the unconscious is going ahead and uncovering and confronting what's in that room, even if you can't avoid it, but you got to get through it. We're talking about in the essay, she was talking about the shame, and she was talking about, it was the shame and it was something else, the shame and the fear,
Guilt.
and those being the things we have to navigate, because we don't always know what the source is. We're just stubbing our toe on it, but knowing it's there and it might just hurt can't be an impediment to moving through this space, this life. And so when I think about the unconscious, I think about it in relation to this essay as the expression of, or source of, or container for the obstacles between yourself and true expression. And those mostly being the shame and the fear that were brought up within the essay, that are things that are imposed upon us and infused into us by, modern patriarchal, society. Because we weren't born ashamed, we were taught to feel shame about things, and we'd have to actually stop looking away from them and look right at them to accurately judge if they're all that worthy of shame or not. So usually they aren't, and the same goes for the fear. So that's what I think about when I think about the writing and the unconscious and the responsibilities that go with having both.
See, I think of the unconscious as kind of the opposite, as it is thought unencumbered and free. Because for me, my unconscious is not burdened by all these rules and the shame and the guilt that has been instructed. Because I remember as a child thinking, well, you got to make sure you can't do that. You got to make sure you don't do this. You got to make sure that, you behave this way. While my unconscious was working without any of those restrictions, and that's kind of where all of my stories start from, are just this uninhibited thought processes of things that I've absorbed and facts I've absorbed, and it's a maelstrom or a black hole that's, I don't know, spitting it out of a wormhole into a new novel idea or something like that, as opposed to if I try to actually consciously think up something for my writing, it usually turns out to be crap, because I'm still trying to work through so many of the restrictions that society has put on. But those are my thoughts.
And there's something there between what you both have said about the unconscious versus the story of the unconscious. Like, there is a story that is told about the unconscious, and that's the story that forces you to repress things into the unconscious. This is the part of you that is not to be believed, that is not to be trusted, that is considered the source of madness or chaos or all these things. And then, Sarah, you talk about it being a place of freedom, a place that is unencumbered by shame and by fear. Yeah. And I think that it's really powerful to be able to access that, even through all of the voices that tell you that is a place that you shouldn't have access to.
I know Sarah brought up, the empowered way that she was raised, and her connection to her community and her history. I have a funny feeling that also informs her view of the unconscious, because she was taught maybe to honor it. I'm assuming. And I think that it brings to light how important it is to be taught how to honor your truth. I know that not all Black women are taught to honor their truth, especially growing up. and especially if you're autistic and you have a mouth on you. So, it's I think that probably does do a little bit to inform how we confront the unconscious or how we view it. Because my truth did feel a bit like a minefield growing up. It was something I was taught to distance myself from. Something I'd have actually really observed until this essay. So it bears thinking about. I got some unlearning to do, but I feel like I think that might be one of the things that informs opinions about our unconscious as Black women.
Yeah, I resonate really heavily with what both of y'all have said. I think that I tend to associate the unconscious both with spirituality and also with just the realm of the uncertain across the board. I read a book last year called Art and Fear by David Bales and Ted Orland, I think were their names. And one of the things that they mentioned in this book was that in the creation and the pursuit of art, you kind of have to build up a tolerance for uncertainty. And I thought that was interesting, even though they're two white men. I find that in my experience as a woman and as a Black woman, I find that I encounter the uncertain often because in my experience, you're often existing through the lens of people's projections. And so it's this really interesting territory that you have to navigate as a woman, where you are, to Erin's point, attempting to find your truth, your reality, an understanding of who you are while navigating through a world that is like attempting to tell you what you are, And so I think for me, the world itself almost is the realm of the unconscious. It's a territory of uncertainty. And you sort of have to be really precious about anchoring yourself in it and finding a way to be who you are and stand firmly in that throughout it. And I think that the process of navigating through that is how I think about the unconscious.
I love what you say, Bri, about being like an artist is like navigating the uncertainty, because like there's like a lot of fear, like especially when I want to work on like a longer project, there's a lot of fear that comes with that. Like, am I getting this right? And some of the things that I've started to do is like book journaling. So talking directly to the book. So journaling, like I'm talking to the project, if that makes sense. So I ask like questions like, okay, what do you want to be? I have an idea of what the book is, but what do you want to be? And I also ask myself, like, what are you afraid of, and why are you afraid to tell the story? And just journaling some of those fears, like, really helps me to kind of like figure out where I want to go with a project, because I don't know, it kind of takes it out of my own head and it makes it this thing that's talking back to me and telling me what it wants.
That's awesome. Sarah, can you speak more to the interviews you do with your characters?
Oh my gosh. I've talked about this in my writing groups, and I don't know where I developed this habit, but a lot of times if I get stuck, I will sit down and interview my characters. And sometimes the opening question is, what is wrong with you as a person? But a lot of times if I feel like I don't know a character, I will sit down and ask them, like, what is your favorite memory growing up? What's your favorite food? What do you think about your love interest? This just questions so I can get to know them better, and then they start talking back to me. And that's in our conversation, I can kind of work out what the problem is in the story. It helped me realize that one of my characters actually has anxiety. So it's like once I realized that, it made him more of a deeper character. And knowing about his family helped him be from this flat, he's a perfectly good guy, to he's a perfectly good guy who has to do this because he's the only son of his noble family and everything is riding on him to be successful. So yeah, the interviews really help. Some of my characters don't want to talk. and it gets interesting. There's a lot of yelling sometimes.
Who yells? Do you yell or do the characters yell?
I think one of my villains cussed me out one time.
God damn.
I just let them say whatever they're going to say, and but I'm the narrator, so I threaten them. I think it comes from like writing fan fiction back in college. That's why it's so easy for me.
I love that.
I have actually, I've led a couple of workshops, writing workshops that were about overcoming writer's block, and interviewing characters is one of the tools that always comes in handy. And another one is if you have a problem with a scene, to write a letter to the character that isn't doing what you want and literally threaten them with what you're going to do to them if they don't jump in line. Having them write that and then making them read those letters out loud, they can't even pay attention. They start writing halfway through the exercise. Because whatever it is that is like in their head, they're getting the argument back, and now they're figuring out what about their characterization they weren't vibing with. Because, these characters they're disrespectful. They don't listen, and they do what they want to do. So sometimes you just got to really go ahead and let them know that you think you're the boss, so they can tell you why they're the boss, and you can write that down. So yeah, I love these tools. I love these tools.
This is great because it feels like it's doing the work of rejecting all of the fears that have been projected onto you that stop you from engaging with the full imagination of the unconscious, like all of the possibilities. Which brings me to my final question, which I am actually borrowing directly from Bri's pen. Bri said, quoting the text, "Women's imaginary is inexhaustible. Their stream of phantasms is incredible. How can we consistently tap into this / bring it out of us? How do we, quote unquote from the text, resist death and make trouble? And what is a new concrete style of writing that can be grounded in and developed from these ideas of the inexhaustible imaginary?"
I'm going to jump in again.
Let's go.
Go somewhere where your voice is the only one you can hear. I'm sure that there are people who are very, very good at blocking out all the external nonsense and the bills and the tasks and the chores and the opinions and the memories and the trauma and all of that. I'm not good at it. Sometimes I have to find a way to remove myself, if not physically, then just mentally. But I think it's just the portal that we are, not just as women, but as creative women who have inexhaustible creativity. If we're just fountains of music and there's too much noise around and we just can't hear it, what good is that? We have to really take responsibility to find the place where we can express what's actually happening, confront what's really happening, witness what's really happening in our heads. And that means sometimes shutting everything else up. And that, depending on the day, week, month, year, area you are, takes a different sets of skills. So I think the creativity, the constant fountain of what we can create, being inexhaustible, can just be like a waterfall where it just flows out to nothing if we can't find a way to create the proper space for what we can bring into the world.
That part. Especially in a Black femme body where everyone expects everything of you all the time. I really appreciate that point, Erin, and the permission to withdraw in order to create.
And one thing that I also have to bring up too, because I go to school, I work full time, and I try to write as well, is that I will sometimes block my own creative flow because I'm afraid I'll get lost in it and give up everything else. And I know that if I got into that space, wonderful things would happen. I just lose my job and I'd forget to eat and this person wouldn't hear from me for a while. And there's all these ties that kind of drag me out of that stream of constant creation. And I just have to find a way to balance and manage it. But sometimes I think about what it would be like if I just said, I'm going to do nothing but what my purpose is. And the power that comes from even considering that I will scare myself with what I think could happen if I just let go and plugged in like that.
Yeah, I wanted to just piggyback off of what you were saying, Erin, because it reminds me of a bell hooks essay. I believe it's in Art on My Mind, but she talks about the need for solitude in the creation process. She talks about the need that women have to be alone, to process their experiences, to take time to be with themselves. And so I think to answer the question, Shingai, I think trying to make space for that, or maybe even getting into the habit of not being guilty for desiring that space, that's definitely something that I struggle with a lot. I have a lot of guilt about how much alone time I need in order to be able to write and think about things. Could be one way to sort of crystallize what we're discussing. And then also something that I've been trying to put into practice as of late as someone who has had a tendency throughout my life to sort of succumb to the like mass process of shrinkage that happens like when you exist in a feminine body from outside sources. I would say just don't deny yourself of any feeling or thought or experience you have. Don't sacrifice yourself in the name of trying to appease others, in the name of trying to be like palatable for others. Whatever exists within you, just allow yourself to be in it and to feel it. Say what's on your mind, what's on your heart. And yeah, just pursue what you are passionate about. I think that the pursuit of self-actualization is like the most noble and powerful experience that any human being could embark on. And I think that as women, again, we need to sort of release associations of guilt with becoming like fully self-actualized. So I would say that maybe that's with those things in practice, maybe we can start to like crystallize a method of writing that reflects that.
I was going to say, if you are about to start a project and you feel fear and you feel the trembling in your hands and in your body, it is because you are about to do something great. It is the first pangs of birthing something new and something wonderful. And it is a feeling that you should embrace and get to know and be familiar with, that the projects that do not fill you with fear are the easy ones. The ones that scare you just enough where you want to put down your laptop or your phone or your pen and your pencil are the ones that you have to pursue because it is of you and your body, and it is your gift to the world.
Well, that's another battle cry.
I have chills.
I am a preacher's daughter. So.
And maybe just like one line, we usually end on like, what keeps you writing? Yeah. So if y'all can say that, and if you want to drop your socials, that would be amazing. Where to find you?
My name is Erin Brown. You can find links to my work at ebrownwrites.com. And also I am on Blue Sky as Babblewalkie, I believe, or Babble Brown, and Instagram as the same.
And what keeps you writing, Erin?
What keeps me writing? Joyce, the voices in my head won't leave me alone until I put them on paper. You know, you ask them. I'll pass the message along. I do it because it's how I breathe. It's how I breathe.
Well, I am Sarah Macklin. You can find me on Blue Sky as Killian Fantasy, on Instagram as Sarah_Macklin. And what keeps me writing? To get these ideas out of my too full head.
I can go next. My name is Bri Stokes. You can find me and my work on my website, bristokes.com. And I'm on Blue Sky at bristokes.com and most other social media apps at Bri Stokes Writes. And what keeps me writing these days, I would say, is the Toni Morrison quote that I'm going to paraphrase, but when things get difficult, artists get to work. I think just it gives me a sense of purpose and an anchor in the midst of what feels like a lot of chaos. So that's what keeps me writing.
I'm Yvette. You can find me online at Lisa_Teabag. What keeps me writing? I think same as like Erin and Sarah. I think these stories are like haunting me and I just need to get them out of my head.
Amazing. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
This is wonderful.
And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.